All right, next up, we have Christina Zhu, who is going to be giving us a lovely history of JavaScript, as well as a look at its future. Christina is a senior developer advocate who co-founded the hackathon Hack Davis, which is still running, happened just a few months ago, not too long ago. Christina's COVID hobby. Who had COVID hobbies? Go ahead, put your hand up if you had a weird COVID hobby you might be a little embarrassed about today. I was collecting rocks. Christina's COVID hobby, though, was collecting Pokemon cards. And if I recall correctly, is quoted as saying, opening Pokemon cards is basically just gambling for nerds. And with that, Christina.
Thank you. Cool, the mic is working. Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Christina. I'm a senior developer advocate, formerly a SLE. I used to work at Amazon too. So I am super excited to be here today to discuss some history and evolution of JavaScript. So while these changes might seem kind of trivial at the surface, they have substantial impact on how we program on the day-to-day. So if you walk away from my talk and learn like at least one new thing, I'll consider that a success. So first off, does anyone remember these? Yeah, do you guys remember having one? When was the last time you fed one? Fed your pet? Okay, anyway, so these are Neopets. I had been coding JavaScript for a while now, but if I were to be honest, my introduction to JavaScript happened with Neopets, and I will explain what that means. So Neopets, when you first joined, this is what your user profile would look like. Pretty ugly, but luckily Neopets had the ability, you could customize your profile page with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I was 9 years old, and making sure my profile didn't look like this, because I wanted to flex on all my friends, I had to make sure it looked like this, which was way cooler. Yes, thank you. So I had been technically coding in JavaScript for 20 years, even though I did not know what JavaScript was back then. So yeah, so that's my history with JavaScript. Let's journey back to 1995, when Brendan at Netscape introduced a revolutionary programming language, initially called Mocha, out of a 10-day coding sprint, which can be seen sometimes, I think. But it was a business-driven decision because Netscape's competitor named Microsoft was about to release something called Internet Explorer. So Netscape wanted to get ahead of it and decided to make Mocha, which was then called LiveScript. But then something called Java was created, and they were like, okay, this is too juicy to pass up. We actually need to call it JavaScript. So, but despite their like linguistic similarities, they're about as similar as a car and a carpet. So they're like not really related at all. But yeah, that's how JavaScript was born. So I'm gonna do a lightning round. We're gonna go through each year of JavaScript and what was introduced in their new features one by one. I guess now is a good time to mention that ES6 was the year that the JavaScript committee decided to do yearly releases instead of once in a decade releases. So yeah, let's go through them very quickly. Some of you probably already use all of these all the time. So 2016, we were introduced to the includes. We also have a new exponential operator. So now we don't have to use math.pow. We can just use the exponential operator. And you can see that the includes method also can detect not a number, which is great. So awesome. 2017, we were introduced to the amazing, incredible, beautiful async await syntax, one of its major features which change asynchronous programming forever, basically. So it's a cleaner, more intuitive way to deal with promises. And before this, we used promises and callbacks, but I'm sure many of you remember the nightmare code that would kind of result from very complicated projects. So it was, a godsend when they introduced this. We also introduced object.entries and object.values, which was pretty cool. But before this, we'd rely on a for-in loop. ES9 introduced rest and spread properties. So this allows you to copy or combine arrays more concisely, very Python-y. Async iterators and generators were also notable features of this release, so it allows promises to interoperate with more generators in a more controlled manner. So it works the regular way as regular iterators, but they return a promise for an object. And then finally, we have promise.finally. It's a new instance method. So when a promise is settled, it runs whether or not it is resolved or rejected. So really great for writing like cleanup code, regardless of the outcome of the promise. And then regex improvements. So ES10, we're at 2019. It provided the flat and flat map methods for arrays. No longer will you need to have to wrestle with reduce or concat. But more importantly, one of my favorite features that were introduced is try-catch binding. So you can catch an error even when the error is not specified. This is probably one of my favorite features, and I use it all the time because I'm an anxious programmer. So with ES11, optional chaining was introduced, as well as the double question mark operator, which is called nullish coalescing. So it's a logic operator that checks for nullish values. So these two things, when used in conjunction, reduce the number of error cases and improved efficiency in handling variables. Specifically with optional chaining, it checks to make sure that each one is valid before continuing on. So that was also really awesome. You didn't have to write a 10-level if statement, making sure each one existed before you kept going. And then ES12, the last one before we continue. So we're at 2021 now. We have numeric separators, which improves the readability for big numbers. You can use an underscore to break up big numbers. And promise.any. This is a promise combinator. It resolves as soon as any one of the promises is fulfilled. Any single one of them, the rest of them can reject. It will still return OK. It will only reject when all the promises are rejected. So these are some pretty cool things that were introduced only 2 years ago. Right, so let's talk about some of the newer things that were introduced last year and this year. So despite the fact that they were introduced last year, not everyone really knows how to use them, even if they've heard of them. So this data was taken from the State of JavaScript 2022. A lot of people have heard of top-level await, but only 70% of people have used it. And you can see the rest of them as well. I'm sorry, I did not organize them from biggest to smallest. Right, so yeah, so I think it would be good to go over a couple of these. So the most popular one that has been implemented since last year is called top-level await. So async functions were added to JavaScript in 2017, but until now we can only use await inside async functions. But now you can use the await keyword outside of the async functions at the top level to wait for a promise to resolve. So while using a top-level await in a module, where one module imports another one, the execution of the parent module will wait when the execution of the child one is finished. So I made an example here. So the top one is how we do it before. You had to wrap it in like an anonymous async function, which looked quite ugly. But for the new one, the bottom one works. And I'm sure a lot of you have tried to write the bottom one before they implemented the feature. But now it's real. And now you can do it like that. So this is actually one of the most popular features that they implemented last year. We also have private class methods and fields that were implemented last year. So this can improve the encapsulation of your code and prevent accidental access to sensitive data. So by default, class fields and methods are public in JavaScript. So they are accessible globally. They can be read or modified from outside the class. So before, developers would kind of mark their class with an underscore to mean like, oh, this is private, but there's nothing that actually prevents other code from accessing it. So JavaScript specification does not give any particular meaning to an underscore. But now if you mark it as private with the little hashtag there, it will actually be private, and that is pretty cool. There are also static class fields now. So very Java-y. You might have remembered learning this in your Intro to Object-Oriented Programming class. But yeah, static class fields, this means they are shared between all instances of said class, and they can only be accessed by other static methods. So that was introduced last year as well. And last but not least, we have the .at method for indexing. So the common practice before was to write array.length minus n, where n is the nth item from the end, or array.slice -n, which is hard to read for the first one or has performance issues for the second one. But now with the creation of .at, this also works for strings. It's better for negative indexes, and it's better for error handling too. But yeah, traditionally we've been using square brackets to access everything. And now we can access it using .at, which is safer and handles more edge cases, I think. Cool. So now that we are done with last year's releases, we can talk about ES14, which was just released 2 months ago, actually. So these are the list of the features that were released this year. And I can talk a bit more about these. So we have 5 new array methods, very exciting, and I didn't want to dedicate a slide to each of them, so I put them all here. But essentially we have toSorted, so it returns the elements of the original array in ascending order. toReversed, which is the original array in reverse order. FindLast finds the last element of the array that matches a specified function that you pass in. FindLastIndex is the same thing, but it passes back the index instead of the element. And then toSpliced returns a copy of the original array with the specified element sliced out. Yeah, so actually only FindLast and FindLastIndex were technically released 2 months ago, but Chrome implemented all 5 already. So if you want to try these out, you totally should. And I think this will make leak code a lot easier if you, for some reason, decide to do leak code in JavaScript. Yeah. Shebang comments. So they can now standardly interpret scripts beginning with a hashbang, specifically in node.js. So this essentially allows the execution of JavaScript scripts as standalone executables. I showed the node interpreter here, but it can run lots of kinds of interpreters, so this is really great if you love to script in JavaScript. And next we have symbols as weak map keys. So I had to do a bit of research on this because I personally haven't used a weak map before, but weak map could only use objects as keys before. Now you can also use symbols. So weak map will automatically remove keys that are no longer referenced by any other object. So this is really great for storing temporary data or data that you might need to process once or twice and don't need anymore. So that's really cool. It's always great to see them expanding on stuff like this. So what is next? So I also took the liberty of reading through the entirety of the State of JavaScript 2022, which is an incredible survey, and all of you guys should also answer it every single year if you can. But here are some of the highlights from it. So the top level await saw a 26.5% increase in usage. Vite, or Vite, not sure which one it is very hot and growing fast. It won 4 awards this year. So if you haven't heard of this framework library yet, you guys should definitely check it out. It has a 98% retention rate. There's a lot of globally distributed talent. I think India is one of the top countries where JavaScript developers are growing right now. There are lots of performance innovations in reactivity and hydration specifically, so expect to see more of those in the future. And surprisingly, private fields are the hottest debate topic of the new features that were released recently. So it got the most comments. I don't know why people are fighting about private fields, but here we are. So what do I think ES15 is going to look like, and what do I think that JavaScript will look like in the future? So I guess first I talk more about the more focus on ES modules. So ECMAScript modules, also known as ES modules, is a JavaScript module format, which is the official standard format to package JavaScript code. It offers an easier route to writing JavaScript, which can run in the browser on the server. So it's like very modular, it's really reusable. And I think as JavaScript applications continue to grow in size, we're going to see more and more of those. Functional programming is very, very exciting right now. So you've been seeing a lot of adoption of functional programming concepts within JavaScript. It leads to cleaner, more robust, and bug-resistant code. So for example, libraries like Lodash or Ramda help apply these concepts. And Lodash is one of the top libraries that were also used this year at around maybe like 70%, I think. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more of that. Better async handling. We already saw that with the introduction of async and await. I think it will continue to improve. And it is time to learn TypeScript, my dudes and dudettes. So it is a superset of JavaScript that adds strong typing. It allows IDEs to provide better autocomplete, navigation, and refactoring. It also increases the speed of development and reduces the number of runtime errors. So it's gained a lot of traction within the JavaScript community within the past couple years, and even several prominent JavaScript libraries such as Vue, Angular, and Dino recommend it or even use it by default. So yeah, there's a TypeScript workshop tomorrow. You guys should go. WebAssembly also is very popular right now, so it allows running very high-performance code in the browser. I know some speakers have mentioned it already, which is really cool, and just goes to show how true this is. It offers a lot of promising possibilities for JavaScript to handle really complicated tasks, such as game graphics, video editing, or even physics simulation. Progressive web apps combine the best of web and mobile applications, so they serve as a practical alternative to native apps, while it also maintains, accessibility and shareability of a web page. They are pretty much exclusively built in JavaScript, so I think it would be worthwhile to kind of investigate this if you guys have time. And yeah, more accessible AI. So there's going to be another workshop about it in 2 days, and you guys should probably go because I think there's going to be a lot of AI stuff happening in the next couple of years, and it's going to be very exciting. So I stole some of the data from the report, and we can talk about how our favorite frameworks are doing. So Svelte is introduced in 2019 and is currently the most interesting front-end framework in the world right now. And you can kind of see that it took Vue and React's spot as they both kind of took a couple percentage points of a dive. Angular has unfortunately driven quite a bit lower, and Ember has always just kind of been chilling there, and I expect Ember to continue chilling there for quite a bit. Yeah, so really exciting to see how things go, and really cool to see Svelte, continue to gain more ground in market share as time goes on. So that is really exciting. Now, usage of rendering frameworks. It's really cool to see the increase in usage of all kinds of rendering frameworks. Next.js is obviously the biggest and most popular one, and still remaining at the top. But it's really cool to see that a couple new frameworks have also jumped into the fray with Nuxt, Gatsby, Remix, and Astro also gaining a lot of points. So I do think that more rendering frameworks will become very popular in the future, and I think their usage will continue to increase. So if you guys want to pick up learning something new, Next is probably a pretty good choice. Next is usage of testing frameworks. Really happy to see that JavaScript developers are embracing testing now. Really great to see more unit testing and integration testing in JavaScript applications. And you can kind of see this with lots of different kinds of testing frameworks gaining popularity over the past couple years, specifically Jest, Mocha, Storybook, and Jasmine. These are just a few. The full report has all the different kinds of ones that you might have heard about, but I just picked the top couple just to see the trends over time, essentially. Next, JavaScript versus TypeScript usage in 2022. So on the far left, we have developers that code exclusively in JavaScript. And on the right, we have people who code exclusively in TypeScript only. So this is a very interesting graph because, as you can see, a vast majority of JavaScript developers code almost exclusively in TypeScript or almost exclusively in TypeScript. So I think this is a sign of the times. And I do think, TypeScript is probably where we're going to be headed for the next couple years. And I do believe that the vast majority of JavaScript developers will also become TypeScript developers. So now is a good time to, pick up some TypeScripting skills. And I know a couple of the speakers already talked about a lot of these, but it's really cool just to see the data anyway. Here are the most popular application patterns of 2022. So single-page applications beating out the rest of the pack at almost 75%, but server-side rendering also very popular, coming in at second, and you can see all the kinds of other patterns that are gaining traction. I just think it's really cool that partial hydration is there at all. I think that tech is really awesome, but also really exciting to see server-side rendering becoming more of a thing, considering how good it is for SEO and your browser in general. So really excited to see where this goes next year as well. JavaScript pain points in 2022. The top one being code architecture, then managing dependencies, then state management, and surprisingly, date management at number 4, which I guess is a big headache because I myself also wrestled with this for a couple hours last week. Then debugging and finding packages. So if any of you guys have some really great ideas on how to solve these pain points, these are what people are complaining about. And now is the time to release your own GitHub repository and rack up those stars and slap it on your resume. Following up on that, what do you feel like is missing in JavaScript? Static typing, a standard library, better date management, which ties back to the date management thing. So we really need a hero in this field right now. Immutable data structures and observable JavaScript. So if you guys have any great ideas on how to fix any of these issues in JavaScript, now is your time to shine. Next, how happy are you with JavaScript? So this was one of the funniest questions I saw in the report, and I decided to put this up here. So overall, it does seem like JavaScript developers are quite happy, and I can kind of see why. When I first started using JavaScript a couple years ago, when I first graduated, oh man, that was a while ago. Yeah, it was quite the struggle sometimes, and you could add strings and numbers together for some reason. But with all the improvements they've made these past couple years, and async await, for example, try catch blocks, TypeScript, for example, I can see why a lot of JavaScript developers are pretty happy nowadays and doing pretty well. So I don't know if this reflects all y'all's experience, but it does seem like the vast majority of us are having a good time. And I think it goes to show that TC39, the committee that runs JavaScript and releases the new features, is doing a pretty good job. That being said, if you are part of the 10% that is very unhappy and having a terrible time, there are ways to contribute to ES15 to solve your own woes. I included a link over here in my slides, but essentially it's very similar to just opening a regular PR. You write about the issue you're having, you code up a solution, they rip it apart with comments. You do that over and over until they're happy with it. And then you can say, I made JavaScript, and flex on that during your family dinner. But yeah, so it's a pretty easy README, and it actually is a lot less intimidating than I thought it was when I took a look at it. So if you ever thought about actually, thinking, I have a really good idea for another array sorting operator, then now is your time to shine. Right, so yeah, that's actually all I had today. Hopefully you guys learned at least one new thing, and thank you very much for listening.